That was a terrible movie.
Notebook?
The Notebook.
Oh, you
You
have no
liked it?
appreciation for love.
Dad, did you like it?
I think so.
Okay, I thought
Maybe
it mangled the real meaning of love, but at any rate,
I I am not sure because I might have because the two are similar. One's Notebook and one's like Message in a Bottle or
okay.
something.
All right, hi, and welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today we have another episode for you today, and it will. I'm gonna start again. I said today twice, and I didn't like that. Okay, no,
Yeah.
today is today, and
Today.
today is gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
That was a Kamala Harris introduction. That one didn't go well. Word salad. Hi, and welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today is our episode. We're going to talk up through some stuff, but we're going to kick it off. We're just going to jump right in. Talking about the revival. I know we haven't, the Asbury revival, we haven't been on with you guys in a while. Done some random stuff, kind of took a little sabbatical there for myself. But this last year, particularly, I've been thinking a lot about revival and in terms of when we've been going through these episodes, it's been really kind of something that I was thinking about when we were talking about realignments and political shifts. And, the whole purpose of the show, I've mentioned, if you watch the channel much, is talking about how the right, get certain things wrong and the left is kind of crazy, and where, these two can meet and how we can forge a way forward for our country. So part of that, I really feel convinced that there's a need for an awakening. We had the first great awakening before the founding of the country that really set the stage for how this country was founded. The second great awakening happened, and that really our the republic almost failed at some point in its early years. And really, I think the second great awakening had a huge part to play in that. And then you have sort of the progressive era, which was less religious, but you certainly had religious elements of it with the tolerance movements and a lot of religious elements, but it wasn't just a religious element. That we moved into kind of the FDR era, the New Deal era. And a lot of people say that we sit there and we've been there for a long time in this last political era, and that we're due for a shift. Some people make a case that there was a shift with Reagan in the 70s and 80s, and there that there's another shift, and even now we're kind of due for another shift. But I would argue that almost you had some revivals, the Billy Graham revivals and things in that time period that were certainly a part of. I call that a mini shift in our politics. So since this show has been predominantly political up to this point, we've tied in a lot of like religious themes. So this episode is going to be a lot more in religious tones and themes, but we're going to definitely have some political elements as well. So, like I said earlier, we're going to talk about the Asbury revival, because that's something that I've just been thinking. We're not going to get another political realignment until we get a revival, and the probably the week that I just became so convinced of that, just spiritually in my heart, that like, man, there's going to be a revival and we need to have a revival. I heard about this revival that actually happened, and it made the news. So I don't know if you guys have strong opinions about it. I was looking up some things. There's some people out there with some strong opinions. It's like, oh, it's not a real revival because it's just a bunch of people, just praise and worship. There's no preaching, involved. And so it's not, real. It's very all this emphasis on the Holy Ghost and, whatever, and less emphasis on the teaching and the repenting of sins and stuff. And so it's not a legitimate thing. But I certainly think that, I mean, my personal feeling, so I'll go ahead and just lay the cards on the table before you guys jump in there, that we're going to see a lot more like pockets, and it's not going to be highly publicized, but it's just pockets. And Dad, you mentioned this earlier, so I'll let you, explain this a little bit more, but I think that you honed in on the preaching wasn't that spectacular, and yet you had a revival, and I think that God doesn't need humans to I mean, certainly to say the words, but he does the work in the heart, on the stuff that we can't see. How many times have you heard pastors say, I preached my worst sermon ever, and like 16 people came to the altar call and lives were changed that day. And then you hear preachers like, I researched this, I put so much effort into it, my delivery was great and everything, and nobody responded, and that discouragement of feeling like you had so much effort. And I think a lot of that is God is the one that moves and God is the one that works and in people's lives, and the emphasis is on obeying, and following and trusting that God's going to do the work. It's not your work to do anyway. So, but Dad, you can go ahead. And I hope I didn't steal your thunder there with that. But what is your impression?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said I watched the sermon that was preached just before this, movement started, and it wasn't delivered in great eloquent words or thunder or repent or it was just sort of an average kind of talk, kind of thing. It certainly had a good message to it. um there were parts of it where he made application about God's love towards people and the things that they're going through. There was a definite point there where I think he connected with the audience and also prayed over the audience, that seemed to me to be something where people realized God's love and forgiveness and that type of thing, and their need for a relationship with Christ. Um, but it wasn't anything really profound. In other words, if you would just watch the sermon and then, you know, not know that something happened afterwards, you wouldn't think that anything was, he gave his message and da da da. Like most messages are given, and you know,
Uh,
uh, people, you know, may think about it, whatever, but they're not profoundly stopping and meditating and praying and saying, God, this applies to me and I need you in my life. Um, so you wouldn't have that expectation. So to hear now that, I don't know, the last number I heard, has been a few days ago, something like 50,000 people have come through, Asbury, and other places have also had, uh, a revival. Again, some of those I think are, I hate to be a little bit cynical, but it's kind of like, somebody is, I forget what the word is, but where somebody's a serial killer, and then you have somebody else that's doing a similar type
Copycat.
copycat kind of thing. Yeah, and I feel like some of these others that we're hearing about, um, are just wannabes. Again, it's hard to know. I mean, unless you're there and all, but just some of the way things. It's part of it is social media too. Right now, if you do something on, well, at least a few weeks ago, if you did something on the Asbury revival early on, if you were one of those early people, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of hits because everybody's checking it out and you've got something out there on it. So, that's going on too. So there's copycats and all, I feel as well. But I'm thankful that it's there. I'm thankful that people are longing, and I think that's what I feel about it. People want to have, a religious experience, and there is a real religious experience. There is something to having a relationship with Christ. Um, but I had a professor at graduate school that used to say, fire tends to go out. you know, um, it's good to take time to have a revival, to rededicate yourself, to have those moments, we still have to go about our life. And I think those things change us and make us better and all, but we all can't just stop our lives and for the rest of our life hang out at Asbury College.
Yeah.
We need to go there, or have something like that on occasion. Each period of time in your life, as you grow, you need to recommit. It's
Right.
not that you're getting saved over again. It's not necessarily that you're having a revival, but you're having a mini revival within yourself. Not necessarily with other people. Sometimes it's great when you have it with, collectively,
Mhm.
these things. But I think as a Christian, there are times when I realize that I've been so busy, I've been so caught up in things that I really haven't. I mean, I've been doing my due diligence. I've been reading my Bible, uh, every day, praying, going to church, those kinds of things. But I haven't really stopped and really allowed the profoundness of a relationship with God and the Word working in my life. Um, and there's times in my life that um, it seems like every couple of months for me, it's like, oh, it's like I wake up and I thought like I haven't really, you
Mhm.
know, stopped and really thought about this or really, it seems like at that moment I wake up and the Lord is speaking to me. And
Mhm.
it's not
Mhm.
every day. But it's that type of thing. So those are the things we need. And I think that revival collectively helps to remind people that they can do this and should be doing this and recommitting themselves, um, because they're caught up in whatever,
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So that's
Uh,
my take on it.
you gave me a lot of good thoughts, but I'm not going to interrupt. Matt, go ahead. Your thoughts on Asbury before I.
Yeah, there are known charlatans that have gone to it and have done like who's spoken in front of the congregation, we'll call it, the people that have come to Asbury for the revival. I'm not gonna say that this is a straight up, counterfeit revival, but I will say that there are a lot of charlatans who will obviously take advantage of this large group of people to try to get more into their own flocks. This is to be expected, but really we're going to know we're going to know more about it when we get a chance to see this fruit, so if I go to a revival and I have this wonderful experience and I'm refreshed inside, but then it doesn't transfer into how I talk to my neighbor, then it may have been something. It may have been somewhat genuine, but chances are I don't know that it really was a genuine work of the Spirit if we're not seeing a long lasting change. The persistence of it is really where I think you see a good revival versus one that pretends to be a revival. The difference even between the first Great Awakening and second Great Awakening, persistence of the first one was insane, versus the second one. The second one, you ended up having a lot of fall away after it, which to me indicates that it really was, some people, it was for them rededication, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a revival, because it wasn't that massive, real repentance. So, anyways, that's my thought
Yeah.
on it.
No, yeah. These are great comments, and it's bringing up a lot kind of thoughts that I was having in a conversation I was having with someone recently about it. Um, I think that, you know, Dad, you mentioned something earlier and reminded me of like a relationship, when you get to know somebody and then you go through a tough time in your life or, whatever, and then you come back and you get to know them in a different way. You bond over different experiences because you've had different experiences in your life. So rededicating your life or, revisiting that relationship can be a really, good thing, a helpful thing in, just building that relationship. And I think back out to the country, you have the first awakening or the Great Awakening, and you have the second Great Awakening, and then you have these different sort of like periods of revival, kind of at a national level. And I think Billy Graham at one time said, if only 5% of the people that came to these things and confessed, and gave their life to Jesus actually changed their lives, then this will be a huge success, because there's always going to be those charlatans. There's always going to be those, things. There's always going to be people that are, that went in one ear or out the other, or they just came for an experience and they got an experience and they left and it didn't change their life. If one person, changed their life, it's like the parable of the 99, leaving that 99 to go get the one. That is something I don't ever want to be in a position where I say that, just because, majority of people, may not have, got closer in their walk or changed some aspect of their life, that it was not successful, that it was not worth it. I mean, what are we here on this world to do? Is to go to work every day and make money? I mean, like what like that's not a great existence, and that's not what I find purpose and meaning in existence. So so that's kind of my thought. But it's interesting because he said people are thirsty and hungry for a revival. I think about this sort of like woke phenomenon. It originally, the word woke came from waking up or becoming woke, seeing social injustice. Oh, you got some cookies. Nice.
I got the cookies, yeah.
Cookies with your bacon.
I love bacon.
Guys, I'm losing my train here. It's getting derailed like Ohio right now. That's okay. The term woke came originally from waking up and seeing social injustice, right? And you have this sort of social justice movement is society saying like the relationship has changed, right? Like, we're seeing more things and now we're craving an answer to it. And I think wokeness is because there isn't a good spiritual, I mean, like we almost need a great awakening, like, like to steal that term away and almost like redeem the term. Like you do need to wake up. You do need to see this. I mean, just taking the word awake, but making it awoke, right? Now to see these things and to actually act upon them and translate that into actions and translate into something I think could be.
But what we need to see is not just our relationship with man, because if we start with our relationship with other people, then we're leaving out our original purpose for being here. So what we need to wake up to, and in order for this to be a revival, in order to be a real awakening, would be to realize our relationship with God, like that we are before him and we're wasting the time that he's given to us, the precious time, and we don't even have any clue why we're here. And we are sinners in the hands of an angry God, and he's not angry for no cause. It's not just that he's vindictive, and it's not that he made us for wrath. He made us for glory, and we're taking his wrath because we won't take his leadership, and that's the awakening that we need to have. We need to have this awakening to our relationship with God, and then our relationship for man will overflow from that. And you'll see real social justice. You'll see mercy instead of taking advantage of any possibility, because you can't get people to stop taking advantage of each other by social programs. It just won't ever happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing. Like they're trying to do these social programs to get men to stop taking advantage of other men, but that won't work. The only way to get that to happen is to get more people to have a right understanding of their relationship with God and to fear God, so that when somebody is a landlord is evicting widows, he knows, due to the fact that God has been moving in other people's lives, and the church is alive and well, and he can see God's blessing on people, that he is at the very least going to miss out on God's blessing, and probably in this life experience God's judgment, and if not in this life, for sure in the next. So that would bring social justice.
When you read the scriptures and you see that God has forgiven you a lot, you can forgive other people, you know?
Yeah.
And that is
Mhm.
exactly what that, and too many Republicans are relying on the invisible hand of the free market to guide these people into the right and moral decisions. That's never going to happen. That's
Mhm.
not how humanity works. If and greed, trying to take greed, oh, that greed is actually good because that makes you more profit and you know whatever. No, that greed sends your job overseas. That doesn't play out. And then the left
Right.
tends to use the government as the person who's supposed to regulate these morality, you know, you're supposed to do this with, you know, whatever, we got to tax the rich and use that to pay for, you know, the poor. And that doesn't work out well because it's
Well,
administered by human hands that are
but
bureaucracy, and human nature steps in both cases. Human nature steps in and
yeah,
it goes awry. And so you'll never have
but
a
in both
good country,
cases,
you'll never have a good company, you'll never have a good government unless you have God and the pressure of either the social pressure of doing the right thing every time or the conviction to do the right thing. And
Mhm.
both are powerful. I think both
Yeah.
are absolutely powerful and both are needed. We need more people that have the moral conviction to do the right thing, and we need more social pressure for people to do the right thing. I think both of those
Mhm.
things are very important for our society to move forward. And I think a spiritual great awakening is what can be a catalyst to get us there. And I'm certainly
Mhm.
hoping that it comes soon. And sorry, Matt,
Yeah.
you had sounded like you had something to say.
I was just saying that both sides can have a measure of success, and that can distract you and make you think that you can have full success, right? So with capitalism, you can have a measure of success where, in fact, the average standard of living and justice for people has gone up when the free market has been allowed to be free, and also when the regulations have been put in place that have caused many different things to change. Pollution controls, for instance. Pollution back in the 50s, 60s, 70s was real bad. Pollution controls came in, they became commonplace, and then you saw pollution easing up in our cities. Now, of course, it's all gone to China, but that's another story. My point is that you can have a measure of success from these policies, and that can make you think that you're going to have full success if you just go full bore, but you won't, because there's always the reason that you've had a measure of success is because people willing to play ball, and only so many people will ever play ball. There will always be people who are dumping their junk in the river. Always be people who are running their train lines without a proper staffing, and you know then they have this disaster and like, oh well, we're just going to close down and pretend nothing happened. You know, all of these
Yeah.
different things are going to continue to happen because there's sin in people's hearts, and there's not enough love for neighbor in people's hearts because there's not the love for God that needs to be there. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
No, you were talking about like the I thought I wanted to stand now. I said the you know pressure from you know the government, those regulations, right? And then there's
Mhm.
pressure from you know society. That's the part where nobody cares right now. You know, nobody
Mhm.
nobody seems to care, at least, you
Not
know,
nobody. It's
whether
just not enough to stop it.
yeah. Well, Dad, did you have something to say? I'm sorry to jump in there. It looked like you had something. No.
No, I'm
Okay.
just enjoying the cookies.
Oh, okay. I'm a little
So,
jealous of the cookies.
I wanted cookies for the last couple days and talked to Anna and Brenda, and they
Made you
cooking up some
some.
cookies, making some cookies. Yeah.
Love it.
I love oatmeal cookies. Yeah. So
Mm.
got oatmeal raisin cookies.
I'll pass on the raisins. Anyways,
Yeah. Have
um,
to pull them out.
um, yeah, but I think
But
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I think you both have a point. I think that, you know, we look to government has its purposes and all, but it doesn't work well apart from a moral change. And um, so it needs to be it needs to be both,
Mhm.
you know, working in concert. It seems that we have
We've got a
religious
cacophony.
people that are fighting with the government because of where the government's going, and we have the government fighting against religion. And so we just have this mess going on.
I think it's funny because we kind of put it into positive terms rather than negative terms. So I tend to think of like power corrupts, right? So power in all these corporations that corrupted these corporations, and their incentives is to make money, and it's to, like I said, ship jobs overseas, or the corporate is different than the managers. And so the managers' incentives are to deliver results for the corporate, whatever. So it's like to drive numbers, right? So but the workers are just getting the crumbs left of whatever's there and working on a number system with delivering results, and it's just this cog in a wheel, and management doesn't care about you. Well, management, it doesn't feel like corporate cares about them, but you're better off than the peons, like, so you get at least paid a little bit more. So there's this like weird like unhappiness across the board, in most of these companies that I see. And I've talked to a lot of people. I was talking to somebody today about that. We had a very, very long conversation in the middle of Walmart with today, like an hour-long conversation about how there's no respect. People that are getting hired in at several dollars more with zero experience than people that have been there forever and doing their jobs. And he got docked like time. He wasn't allowed to use his PTO time to go back and get his like equipment that his wife had taken his car, so he just switched cars that day. So he had to go to his house. It was like 8 minutes down the road. So it's 15 minutes off the clock, right? Well, he's just like, well, can I put in PTO? I was like, okay. Well, he came back. Well, you can't use that. It's going to be unpaid, whatever. And it's like, well, now it's going to be held over. And he's like, it doesn't mean anything. But if you get multiple of these, then it could result in disciplinary action. I was like, so it does mean something, and that's not fair because, you said that I could, and it's like, I don't understand. And it's personal time off. It's not requested time off. It's, so, and HR is designed to protect the company, and cover their own butts and not actually look out for the best interest of workers. So like nobody is able to represent, and, he's willing to take it all the way to like see where it goes, doesn't have a lot to lose. So feels like he can take it all the way. So it's like, I see this just seed in his eyes, nobody cares about him and what he's doing. They care about results and getting those numbers and throwing authority around in order to get those numbers. And I feel like that plays out over and over and over in so many situations, that I've seen. Yeah. And it's because people don't care about mentoring the person that comes in. A young person comes into the company and they're mentored into it, and there's actually care in the community about the value that you're manufacturing and making things, the pride in the work. And that's a real shame. It's a real shame. And the fact that, we talked about, it's interesting that, somebody can go to school for 4 years and get a degree, an accounting degree, and then come in and make big changes on like, we got to get this number, it's just numbers on a page, where you have people that have no college, but have a technical degree and could do a masterful job, can work there for 20 years, but can never get into corporate, can never work into corporate because they don't have a degree. You don't have a piece of paper. You have all this leadership skills. You have all the technical skills in this like company, and you'd be a fantastic person to have in leadership and making decisions. But because of that piece of paper, because of how we structure and think about our company on who is serving, it's just awful system. It's absolutely awful system. And it needs to be reimagined. I think everybody should go get out of high school and have 2 years of either the military or trade school before you go to college. Then you're able to apply to college. Have you finished your 2 years of apprenticeship? It's either 2 years in the Army or 2 years in the, in some sort of like trade before you go into college. And you can skip the college part if you want to stay in the trade, but that gives you that nobody would be going into directly out of college. You go from high school to college that probably a parent paid for, to leading people,
I wouldn't say nobody should, but there should be only for people who know that they want to go into academia. Like if you want to go into academia, sure, but we shouldn't be requiring college degrees for people who want to work for corporate.
Well,
That's ridiculous.
academia, internships. You can intern with I don't know,
Okay.
work at a college.
That's fair.
With a professor and grading papers and doing and learning, whatever before you take the college
That might
classes.
work.
You do something in that line of work. There's an answer here. I think there is. You
You're
just
right.
have to think about, you don't get this qualification, you don't apply, you don't get the privilege of getting out and getting this immediate leadership role until you've had some entry-level experiences and that appreciation. I think, I don't know. That's a tangent and apart from kind of what we're talking about. But I think
Yeah.
that
I've said the same thing about trainers. I've seen
Oh yeah.
people go through college and then they start working at a corporation as a trainer, and they've never worked in a warehouse or in out in the world, and they're coming in training, but all they've ever been is in college, and they don't know what it's like to have a supervisor that um doesn't treat people right, or some of
breathing
the
down your
crazy
neck.
stuff that goes on in HR and various things. So yeah, it's very different
It's
to
just
come through the workplace and then go into human resources or training or something like that. So there's something to be said for that. But there also are people that as a kid sold Boy Scout cookies or popcorn or Girl Scout cookies and did various projects and some. But even there, that experience depends upon the individual of what they actually got out of it, because there's
Right.
always somebody who does the project. It's like the kid that won all the science projects. Dad built the go-kart and did the whatever kind of thing, or mom did all the charts and
he could tell you
stuff.
what gravity is, so but he's the science project king.
Yeah. So it's again, it's difficult to say that it should be this way, but we know it when we see it. When we see somebody who has no clue of what work life is like and they're in a leadership position. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that there's just a general lack of regard for people that don't have a college degree, right? I mean, I think that is just looked down upon in our society, especially today. There's a lot of talk recently about what determines whether you're a Democrat or Republican nowadays is how much education you've had. Typically, like if you've had more than a 4-year degree, the chances are right now you lean Democrat, whereas used to be that was not the case. It for some reason that shift has happened because and it kind of plays into the whole like 47% versus the deplorables comments, these types of things. How do we think about the other side? Do we think about them as deplorable and irredeemable, and writing off certain types of people? And I think, tie this back to the spiritual level. I think you can write people off when you don't value them, when you don't see them the way God sees them. God sees us all as he longs to have a relationship with everyone. He died for the entire world so that we all can know him. And so if you have that mindset, if you're reminded of that, if you've had a recent revival, then you could say, okay, you are God's child, and I'm going to think about you differently. And that allows us to have a better society, better work experiences. Making different decisions will come into play. That I think it all comes from that spiritual, like we're not going to there's no answer. There's no politician. It's not Ron DeSantis. It's not, Nikki Haley. It's not Donald Trump. None of these people are the answer to your, to society's problems or, your issues right now. It's truly the need to refocus our lives on what is actually truly important. And so that's my soapbox. So that's like block one, right? So
Okay.
the second thing, I just kind of want to bring up some stuff that's recently in the news here. I just saw this morning that Trump put on Truth Social in a post that had lots of misspellings, that they're coming to arrest him on Tuesday, and for, I think, the charge that they ended up going with, because they were going to get him for the classified documents, but then turns out
Right.
Biden had classified documents and Pence. So it's kind of like, that didn't seem like that was going to be a political winner for him. So what they got him on was paying Stormy Daniels before the election hush money, basically. And so they, tied it in, and then that's what they're going to go with. And so they may add charges with the classified documents later, because, I mean, I guess there's somewhat of a case where Biden immediately, we found these documents, turned them back over to the National Archives, and Trump tried to just say there's nothing wrong with it. I declassified it, so it's okay, and whatever, go away. So I mean, there's a little bit of a difference in approach, but like the core issue is very similar, or the same. But yeah, so that's the news. And I guess two questions from that for both of you guys. Do you think it affects the primary, and what's your just general overall impression? So we started with Dad last time first. So Matt, any overall impressions of Trump being arrested on Tuesday, and what the
I don't think Trump's going to be arrested on Tuesday. And
Okay.
it's possible that that's linked to the fact that he said he was going to, and now they can't let it be right. That's my personal opinion on that.
So you have to arrest him
Exactly.
on Monday or
Exactly.
Wednesday to make him a liar.
Well,
He's a
no,
liar. He was wrong,
The thing about it is in order to be arrested, some judge has to look at it and say, okay, this merits a warrant. First of all, for a search, right? Or you need a warrant to arrest someone too. So yeah, I mean, warranting of an arrest, I just can't
trial
see.
is right now. I think that they're going through all this right now. Like,
Sure,
he's
but
been on
an
trial
arrest. Right, but he's not
Yeah.
under arrest. You can be on trial and not be under arrest. In other words, to escalate it to under arrest, he would have to have a warrant for his arrest. And that's what I don't see that being the case.
Right, you can
I
bring
don't think there's
charges,
sufficient.
but certain types of charges bring different things. So I think what they're saying is they found a way to get this to elevate it to felony charges for the campaign violations or whatever, I guess it would be, in order to issue the arrest warrant. So that's what leaked basically today or yesterday or whenever it leaked, and he found out about it. But today is when he put that out on Truth Social. So I'm assuming that's today.
Well, it is you could take it from your campaign money, right? It's trying to keep away a certain type of advertising or something. I don't know. I'm sure that you can connive something that take it's worthy of taking campaign contributions to keep a woman quiet about.
I think the problem is he did it before he announced running or something, because like that was the thing, is like the way that they got it was like it was not like, because you can do like campaign like payouts and certain things, certain reasons and stuff like that, but it basically hush money. It was just the way he did it or something that they got it.
Yeah.
So
some type of a technicality, but it just doesn't strike me as being a real legitimate thing. I don't know.
Well,
we'll see if it disappears.
It could be, was money used or influence used by Biden to keep his son's computer information out of the, whatever. So, I mean, I'm sure that you could, knowing Trump, there'll be something that he'll come up with to make it the same as what Joe Biden's done, in some way or another, to throw it off. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some level of like Biden doesn't even have to ask for people to, like the media, to do these things, for him and bury the lead and, write it in a favorable way or whatever. He doesn't have to ask.
Come on, man.
But Trump has to, finagle and do all the weird gymnastics and stuff, and that's
post false arrest
I want to
things
be,
on Tuesday.
I want to be careful that, I do not think that Trump is probably clean in this in any such way, and he probably has done something wrong. What level of punishment it is, um, that's
Has to be seen.
difficult. But because of who he is, they're going to try to make it, a federal case. And you have him doing the same thing that Bill Clinton did in the past, type thing. So, it shouldn't be condoned.
I think they're trying to dirty
shouldn't,
him up, to your point, dirty him up for the general election, make him
and
easier.
he is dirty. I
Yeah.
mean, um, there's nothing. I mean, as far as the stench of Trump, he's pretty stenchy, pretty
Yeah.
stinky.
Yeah.
He's awful. He's an awful person, and there's no doubt about it. And at the same time, I feel like it's a double standard. And also, I think sometimes the Republicans are doing a double standard. They're trying to cover for him where they wouldn't for Clinton.
Mhm.
And I think the problem is the man. He shouldn't be running for president. I agree with that. Is he being treated unfairly? Probably not. As some of the things that he has done and advocating for are good. He's that mixed bag.
Mhm.
You wish that he was an upright person. He's not. Does that bring in difficulty for another presidency for him? Certainly. I wish he would just step down.
Yeah.
We need somebody that has character. They don't have to be perfect, but they do need to have some character, and they need to have principles that are different than what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are giving us and are leading us. But I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about, he's getting a raw deal. He probably is, to some extent, but he also, I feel like he deserves it because he's the bad guy.
I
don't know.
Very
He's a moral
similar.
failure.
Yeah, I have very similar. I mean, like, so I've made no apologies for not being a Trump fan. I mean, at first I was. Well, at first I wasn't. I was a never Trumper, during the election, whatever. I was kind of Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, whatever. Those were kind of my top two.
Somebody else.
Yeah, and then but then when he got the nomination, I was like, well, obviously he's better than Hillary. I mean, a stick figure would be better than Hillary. I mean, it was like anything but Hillary. I was like, okay, I went from never Trump to never Hillary, and then which by default made me Trump. And then I liked, like a lot of the stuff. I never really got behind the border wall.
Doing, yeah.
I never got behind. I mean, I thought it was like kind of distracting, the half built, whatever. And that reminds me of something. Like, so, okay. Why do we believe he can end a war in Ukraine in 24 hours when he couldn't build a wall in 4 years? Like, he said he was going to make Mexico pay for it. Like, why would we believe anything that he says?
Is we collect all the drug money that's coming through there, and then we could build a wall with it.
Okay, but you have to be competent to do those things. Like, that's the core.
And two, it might help Mexico's government. If the United States had a wall, it would certainly help Mexico, because they've got everybody in the world coming through their country too, because the border's open. So it might be a good way for the two countries to
but why
build that wall to advantage
of it.
He didn't, because the
every time
the cartels were running Mexico. So the problem was the cartels desperately didn't want it. So they were paying the politicians to be opposed to it. The politicians, as far as from their standpoint, would have been for it. But the real government of the country was not the political government of Mexico. It was the cartels, because they had all of the politicians in their pocket. So
every time Trump tried to do something, every time there was some judge that come, they'd find some judge somewhere that would say like, oh, you can't do that. And then anytime that process happens, it takes 2 years before they say like, oh yeah, he could do it. Well, now he's not president,
yeah,
or 2 years later, now we can start on it. It just the
there was a lot of
legal
money.
system, and the whole news media about so many different things. There were so many different things to fight because of the lies, the corruption,
Right.
the banning of people on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and
Yes.
all of that. Collectively, there was a massive force working against people who would have helped him to do those things. Everything from media to judges, there's just a ton of stuff there.
I hear
And
what
that
you're
costs a lot of
both
money.
saying, but I don't buy very much of it at all. I don't put a lot of stock in that. My thoughts, I know, right? Let's fight. My thought is that he did not hire any competent staff. If your case and what you're putting forward is airtight and you have competent people doing things, you don't get stuck with crazy judges doing, throwing it out on procedural stuff because you've done it the right way. It's the same thing with half of his cases he brought before, that the fraud, were so poorly written cases that the judge threw it out. Like you have to have a certain level of competence to do these things. And a lot of these lawyers were free lawyers. He wasn't paying his lawyers, and he had so many free lawyers, people that were in his staff from over the years in business and doing all these favors. And kind of in the business world, that's how lawyers work. In the government and these politicians, they're paying these high powered lawyers. And so it's the whole Reagan thing. Reagan governed the state of California, and when he came into the White House, he was one of the most effective presidents because he brought all this staff with him. And so he could roll out these processes and these, the bureaucracy, because he had the people to do it. Trump was bringing in Steve Bannon and media people and whoever this guy was and that guy was, and they all just talked a big game and believed in philosophically what he was saying, but had no technical competence to get anything done. So that's what I see happening again. If he gets in there again, he's going to bring the same clown car, of people, and I hate to say it, that nothing is going to get done effectively.
Well, he did get a lot of things done, but just because he threw so many things out there, something was bound to get through. And that's how I think he ended up getting anything done. He did get quite a few things.
Well, what was the biggest thing he got done was the tax cuts, because Paul Ryan had been working on that for years and had it all ready to whatever. And so he gets in there, it's here's the tax cuts we want. And it goes through in the first 100 days. That was his approval rating. His lowest day he ever had in office was the day he signed the tax cuts, because it's here's all your rich, wealthy investor friends, because now you don't have to write off all your property taxes. So everyone in the real estate business is having a heyday, with all these tax cuts. So it's not his biggest legislative achievement was probably the lowest point in his presidency. And all the things that he really, really wanted to get done seemed like either only halfway got done, or the most effective thing that he did get done with judges. That was something that he definitely did get through. And that was why a lot of conservatives really liked him and were on board with it, because he put out the list of judges and he stuck with it and he put those people. But even when Roe v. Wade was overturned, he came and said that was the dumbest thing we could have done. Now we're going to lose the midterm. It's like, okay,
What about the
but this is what we've
foreign
been
policy?
fighting for. The
Yeah.
only thing he has going for him on the foreign policy, I will give him all the credit in the foreign policy.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that, yeah, I think he kept people, like, what is he gonna do? What is he gonna do? And this is a crazy person, and it appears to everybody we're not sure, so let's not do anything crazy because you don't want to risk whatever. Where Biden is so milquetoast that it's like, hey, you want to invade Ukraine, you want to take Taiwan, you want to do this. I mean, now's the time. I mean, like, this man's half
Hey,
awake
you want to send
half the
balloons
time.
over?
Yeah, send in balloons. We can do whatever we want. A circus, aliens. It is crazy time in the foreign affairs department. So
Foreign
I will
affairs,
give
yeah.
him that.
South
But-
China Sea.
But I don't think that because I don't think he can come back and reclaim that same gusto even on that front. Personally, I don't think I don't think he didn't really follow through with a lot of the China policies and stuff. He wanted to ban TikTok and gave up halfway through because they kept like having all these barriers, and he just gave up and moved on. And now Biden's administration is actually the one putting teeth in the legislation and actually probably going to get TikTok banned in the next year or two because of the way they're doing it, because it's the way you go about it. And I'm not saying I'm a Biden fan for sure, especially on the social and all those issues, but like just in effectiveness on governing, it's sad that it's like this man who's barely awake or coherent half the time is his cabinet is doing more than Trump was able to accomplish. And it's sad. And I think that on the right, we just tended to, well, the media is against him. That's why he can't get anything done.
There's half truth to that.
Yeah, they're against him, but is that the reason it didn't get done? I don't think that that's the reason it didn't get done. I think that's
academia was against him as well, and the judges are high into academia, and so they're biased against these things. I think there are things that are going through that are left leaning, that are as susceptible as anything that Trump put out there, but they're getting through because the judges are more amenable to those ideas because of their educational experience. I'm pretty confident that that is the case. And that goes back to that educational disparity that you're talking about, because they're very highly educated conservatives, but they had to fight essentially to remain intellectually objective. Because if you just go with what your professors tell you, if you just believe everything, then you're going to come out pretty left-leaning of almost every educational institution out there for higher education.
And I think part of that is semantics, right? And I went through like the college class that was like really one of the most enlightening classes I had was when it's talking about and we did a whole episode on this, right, with the whiteboard, and we talked about liberal versus conservative and everything, because it like opened my mind to like what the actual argument is for classical liberalism, which turns into liberalism when there is no alternative. There is no classical liberal conservative. And I'm using that classical liberal as like where America came from, right? The founding fathers' ideas, they were all considered classical liberal. You had the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, but they were all kind of in this classical liberalism and like school of thought. And which was new. It was different than, the authoritarians, type, and fiefdoms and that, whatever, which fiefdoms is almost like this, socialist like contract, where the Lord owes the land. And,
yes.
So there's this, so communism existed in some form, I will say, pre that. And then you had, a libertarian where like winner take all system outside of that. Right. So it's a truly libertarian system would be like, a chief in charge of his village, and they sort of just let this guy be in charge because he's the most competent, right? Like the free market hands. Sorry, I'm just trying to break it down. I'm not trying to get too deep into it, but yeah, like you could plenty of examples, right? But this from that came the conservative and liberal that we think about today. And the really extreme end of that would be like democratic socialism. It's not even true socialism. Democratic socialism is just an extreme end of classical liberalism. And then you have conservatism, and then you have like, modern libertarianism now over here. So, but the Republican Party has shifted really far to this libertarian system, and the Democrats have shifted really far towards this democratic socialism. So you have really far ends, extremes in both parties right now. And because you can't really capture the essence, I think, is a little bit lost of this classical liberalism. In the middle is lost. And a lot of these teachers and a lot of these, the liberal teachers that we say are cherry picking from this classical liberalism and considering that the most the most legitimate, and they're claiming it. They're claiming the classical liberalism. And because of that, I think they trap a lot of young minds and get them going down this path into democratic socialism and down onto these extremes, because there is no alternative trying to capture this classical liberal thought. The founding fathers, what was the essence of these things? The social contract, a lot of the things that we've talked about and that people buy into. And even Trump, to a certain level, he's like, don't touch entitlement spending. It's like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? We can't take away Social Security or privatize these things. I mean, like, what are you thinking? This is not going to win with the American people, because that's not how America is structured. That's just libertarian, kind of like too far. So Trump is almost tapping into this classical liberalism more than most Republican politicians, which is bizarre to think, because most people think he's way out there extreme, but he's actually probably closer to the center in a lot of ways, in the center of this classical liberal bubble, which is where the most people kind of instinctively default to without knowing it, without going off into these far extremes. So that's a really convoluted, I hope that was not too hard to grasp, of an explanation there. But
I wonder why there are so few politicians in that place. I would say maybe Ron DeSantis is in that classical liberal, because he's not willing to go crazy.
I would say,
as far as I've seen,
I would say he's a practical conservative. I think. Yeah. That's what I would call him. I think when the Tea Party was popular, he was Tea Party. Now that Trumpism is popular, he's following the Trump, because it's instinctive, that because he is, I think, closer to that classical liberalism, because he understands that and is able to tap into that. He's not so bought into like going down this trail of like, I would call like this libertarian free market, very, very government just regulated, just bad, no government. Yeah, let's just take all the guardrails off.
It's trying to be Reagan. It's trying to be a little bit more like Reagan, but
Reagan was that. I think it's just a misrepresentation of Reagan. It's just, I think we've just blown Reagan up into this like libertarian, like, libertarianism. And it's like, I don't think Reagan really was that, but people have made him into what they want him to be. And it's like all these people getting mad. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
He was really good at coming up with phrases, and if you just take those phrases, it really makes him sound anti-big government. For instance, there's no more terrifying words than "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." That sounds pretty libertarian. So if you take these quotes, these things that he said, and you take them is hyperbolically, and you take them in the most literal way, you put him as a libertarian.
But if you take his body of work, he wasn't.
Precisely.
Well, when he deregulated the air traffic controllers and things along that line. But I also looked at that and think about that time, how the unions were calling the shots and causing so much trouble within, manufacturing and things along that line, where it was impossible for businesses to make money. There needs to be a balance. I mean, workers need to be paid. They need to be paid well.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of companies deserved unions, but at some points unions become like communism. They just are dysfunctional at
Mhm.
some point because they are so
Power
there's so
grabby.
much clashing, yeah, and so much wanting power and being in control, and they
They
can't.
remind me of kudzu. Like does a really good job of making sure that there's no erosion, but nothing can stop it once it gets started.
Yeah.
And
Oh, there's
unions are like
plenty of
that.
things that can stop kudzu, but it does fast grow and it needs to be controlled, right? But the problem is when you just
Right.
kill all the kudzu and now you have a desert. And I think that's what happened in the 80s. You kill all these unions, and in the 90s we send all these jobs to China. Now the CCP is the Chinese Communist Party is growing exponentially and about to eat our lunch and take Taiwan and these microchips. And now we're not going to have a country because we're not going to have iPhones, because we're going to literally be taking the microchips out of our microwaves and our dishwashers to put them into our tanks to fight off the Chinese. And if you think I'm crazy, I'm not. That is a possibility. And I'm not saying it's a soon possibility, but if you continue the path of giving away all of our resources to a country that does not care about you or your people and wants to dominate, maybe they will be gracious overlords of us. Maybe they won't fight us. Maybe they won't send tanks and
Or maybe they'll
airplanes,
collapse
whatever.
in the meantime.
Maybe they'll collapse and they'll just take us down with them. But on the current trajectory, we're
Yeah.
not in good standing.
Actually, that's the ideal
And
scenario in this case.
so, yeah, was it maybe the unions were too bad and like were not well and needed to be changed and restructured? Probably, absolutely, 100%. Do we need to have unions today that have better? But it goes back to people, right? Companies.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, complain all the time, all day about corporations, but I complain just as much about private. So if you're working in a small business and that owner is a jerk and that owner does not care about you or your family or your needs at all, you're just in just a bad situation, as in a corporation where nobody cares about you and you're a cog in a wheel. There's no one of the fundamental problems with socialism, right, is like, oh, equality means we take all the money and we give it out to you, and so equality, so you're equal economically speaking because your worth is green paper, and it's reducing people to money, to economic status. And that is such an evil part of socialism, but that happens in capitalism as well, where we reduce people down to money, and getting that dollar, and it's evil. There's lots of evil in the world. Yeah. So, wow, how did we get off of Trump? Let's go to the recession. This is a really long episode, and we need to get to this recession.
Can we just skip the recession, please?
No, we prognosticated about this last year. I had made a episode, I don't remember when we made it, about the stock market's going to crash. And we talked about how, I think I said Q4, which would like be Christmas, we weren't going to have any goods or anything or like whatever, because the price of lumber at the time was crazy, and we had all this like ships that were off the sea, and I don't know, I made a lot of
fast enough,
very bold predictions about how the economy was just all going to come crumbling down, and it seemed to do pretty good for a little while. So I felt pretty dumb for a while there. And
we went to 8% inflation in 6 months and just stayed there.
Yeah,
I was like, that's not what I was expecting at all. But I think we probably put some type of stopgap in effect, which is now coming to bite us next year. So I was fully expecting close to 20%.
Well, yeah, that's in essence why these banks failed, is because everybody had all this flush with cash and the interest rates were good. So the bond market, where everybody had their money, those started becoming worthless. And then it's like all this extra money, and what do we do? And then mismanagement and poor calculations. And deregulations. The SVB bank went to Trump back in 2016, or the Trump administration, not Trump directly, I'm sure, and asked for tighter or less regulations on the banking industry because they were a tech company and they weren't getting the same exposure of these other banks. So they needed looser regulations. And of course, they got it. And so now, they're the first to fall because they were the ones taking the riskiest bets. It's like Lehman Brothers all over again, right? Like you take risky bets, and now what's dumb is we bailed them out. We didn't, it's not a real bailout, right? No, not a bailout, it's not taxpayers. But when you effectively say 100% of everybody gets their deposits,
yeah,
then
they also didn't get to stay around. They were closed down. So that's another important difference. The company is down and they're not coming back.
SVB is bought. Someone's buying their assets. Yes, they're not going away. This is not.
The U.S. government just bought them.
No, they're trying to shop buyers. They're shopping buyers. PNC Bank, I think, is the current one that is probably going to. But yeah,
government. My point was that the
price.
But the people
they're buying it at pre-market prices.
Really? I didn't know that was happening.
Because it's too big to fail. Well, because you can't take these losses. You can't let investors get screwed over here. You can't do that.
Investors should be the investors should be bad. So should the what are they called? The people. So SVB Bank, this one what really incensed me was they saw that they were failing. They knew that they were going to have a problem. So like a month in advance, they just went ahead and gave them all everybody like the top ranks their bonuses.
They got bonuses
because they were going to need it
on the day they failed.
Oh, it was the day?
The day they failed.
Sorry, why did I think it was a month? You're right, it was a day.
The day.
Yeah. Like, you guys have been doing so bad, here's a bonus.
Protecting one another.
Hush money. That's exactly
hush money.
It's hush
money. Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
The problem
is
scandal. There's no consequences. And
yeah.
The biggest thing is what's going to happen on Thursday, right? Are they going to raise interest rates or keep them the same or go down? It's a wild card. Nobody knows. But the thing is whatever they do, there'll probably be some volatility, and this will go on for another year. And then what's going to happen is you realize all these other banks, we're looking at that bank and saying there's zero consequences, and I'm being safe with my money, and I'm doing things the way they're supposed to be done. And they went out and took all these risks and got bailed out when it got failed. So
and then the top people also paid themselves out an extra amount of money.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter what we do. We could take more risk, like more risk. Like why would we not? Why would we not make more money if we could make more money when there's no chance of failure? When the government is going to step in and there's no chance of failure, why would you not just take more risk? And that's what's going to get us in trouble, and we're going to be in.
Well, it depends upon your political views. It's like the car companies, with the bailout, and
GMC,
where if you had a dealership and you were Republican, you were more likely to be closed than if you had a dealership and were a Democrat contributor. So it may be
this is
have
the first
something
I've
to do which banks get closed out, which ones are more liberal or whatever.
This is the first I've heard of it. What are you referring to with that?
When certain dealerships were closed during during Obama, when they took
recession.
over. Yeah, when they took over, was it
Ford
General
or
Motors?
General Motors. There we go. I think it was General
Motors. Yeah, took over that, and then they took all the 401
the pension
money, and also restructured their businesses and stuff. There were certain dealerships that were profitable, some not profitable, but it was also statistically, if you were a contributor to Republican type things, you were statistically more likely to be closed. One of the ones closed by the government.
I have an innocent answer to that. I'm not sure. It should absolutely be targeted, right? But if you're looking at profitability, and more profitability comes from Chicago markets, California markets, more Republican or Democratic markets, just based on the numbers, whereas like your backwater Texas companies and your Tennessee plant or your whatever like are not as profitable, then you might be more likely to get an axe.
And there may be some.
I don't know.
Again, I don't know
to
what
see
the
the
actual
data.
numbers were and how they figured it and all, but I did hear there was some pushback from some dealerships. You said like, this one's open, I'm getting closed. What's the difference? We're both,
as long as
whatever,
you can compare
and you go like
profitability,
and you go like how, but everybody feels like they've been wronged.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be that there was some politics in there, just like what companies got money for solar panels or
Solyndra.
whatever type things, and those companies that failed hugely, they had no no grounds to get government money, but they did, type thing, other than they were contributors.
The incentive money just disappeared conveniently.
So
I always look for the innocent answer,
conspiracies,
but there is certainly always so there's always a human element, right? I mean, there's always a human element. I mean, like these decisions are being made by humans, and humans have biases, right? Exactly. And so if you're looking at two companies, you're gonna make those based on your biases. I hate to say it. I mean, like, how can you not, right? When you have decisions to be made, and this person's donated to causes you care about, and you're the one that was making the decision, and that one donates to causes you don't care about or you're against.
That shouldn't even be looked at. Like if you're a moral person, you wouldn't even be considering that when looking for which ones to close. You'd be looking at straight profitability. That's the point. And we're going back to the morality.
Which it might be, and exactly, with all this tying back to the central beginning of this episode, where it's like it's good people make good decisions and do good toward people, and evil is not going to do it. Doesn't matter.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, but so with these banks, I mean, could somebody come up behind and say, okay, this one was, this one was given money and held together, and this one was like shut down. Is there anything, in there that may have been, other than just the pure numbers reason for that? And if those were reversed, the media would be all over it. Type thing. And again, I am such a skeptic on these issues, and you're wondering sometime, are they really after me? Is it just my because I'm crazy, I've got my little tinfoil on my, or is it like, they really are after us, and you don't know, because you have the things like the Twitter, stuff and
Twitter files.
You wouldn't know those things had, must not bought the company, but now
thousands of people were
there,
thousands of people were thinking independently, I feel really targeted, and then they found out that it was actually true. So
that's the same thing with the IRS a few years ago with all the Tea Party stuff, and that was just shut down by the IRS. That was a definite, the conspiracy theorists were correct. So, when this goes down as far as banks, what banks close and what won't, you see this pattern in the past, and you go like, okay, who's getting bailed out and who isn't, and how is it, being done? And
the problem is nobody should be getting bailed out. I mean, that's the
right. I
that's
agree.
the issue.
Collapse, but
and they should have to pay, and everybody in the industry ought to look at that as a warning and shore up and do better business, and anybody with less than $250,000 deposit should be made whole. Everybody else should be, allowed to fail, and that would send the right message.
I'm okay with rescuing depositors. I'm just not okay with rescuing investors in that bank.
They should have let it fail, because what they would do is sell the assets and cover the deposits. And you wouldn't be able to make everybody whole, but you could get them I think they did the math, and anywhere from 80 to 90%. But you're talking about Roku and companies that had literally $500 million in their bank account. One bank account. Roku has one bank account that they pay all their employees for, and they do all this stuff. Like, does that sound like wise business planning to you?
No, it doesn't.
I have worked for a small business, and we had 5 bank accounts. I mean, like, why in the world would you have $500 million in one bank account? That is stupidity. And if you made back 90% of your deposits, you would be able to function until the company was bought, and then be made the rest away whole, cover that down.
Yeah.
There was a way to do it, the correct way, and if they wanted to have the government come in and bail them out that last 10%, I wouldn't have been mad about that. But you had to let it actually go through the process. And it's just really irritating where it's like all these politicians were saying, oh, we should have, they should have let those people fail under Obama, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, you can't let them fail. You can't let them fail right now. Like, what in the world? It's like Romney, I think, was one of those. Romney was one of those, was like, was very much let it fail in 2008. And then now it's like saying you have to bail it out, so.
Why is Romney still a politician?
He's a senator still, isn't he? I think Utah.
Who keeps electing him? What's wrong with these people?
Pelosi, he glassed out about a lot of people.
Yeah, it's
why are they still there?
Our Senate right now, actually, if you look at it, like the average age of senators is like almost twice. The average age is twice now what it has been in the past. Like, that's crazy. Like, if the average age, because there's people in there, the 80s, 90s, like the majority of them, like, you're young if you're in the Senate, and you're in your 60s and 70s. Like, that's bizarre.
Apparently now we've unofficially raised the Senate to a lifelong appointment.
Basically.
That's true.
Basically. And the fact that if Donald Trump and Biden run, it doesn't matter who wins, it'll be like the oldest person ever elected to office. It's crazy to think about. Like, why is there nobody else that can do this? Like, there's nobody else that can do this, but that's a whole other conversation. Well, I guess we should probably wrap it up. It's been a good conversation. We'll do it again next week. We'll have some more things for you guys. But that is all for us tonight.
Much joy to the world.
And have I told you guys my construction joke?
Oh no, are you still building it?
I'm still working on it. You took it away from me. It's awful.
It was still good, John Mark, to those of us who didn't know.
Was good.
Yeah, it was awful. Well, my elevator jokes don't even go down well
man,
at all. Oh, see, I ruined the joke.